This is WPSL Port St. Lucie.
The following is a paid program. The content is provided by the advertiser. WPSL, its staff, management, and ownership are not responsible for the content. Investment involves risk. Prior to making any investment, an investor should meet suitability requirements. Past results are not necessarily indicative of future performance. Neither the opinions expressed nor the information provided constitutes a recommendation to purchase or provide investment advice. The material presented is not a substitute for obtaining professional advice from a qualified person or firm. Securities offered through Centaurus Financial, member FINRA and SIPC. And now, the host of the TEAM MARTEK Hour, Joe Martek.
And here it is, the TEAM MARTEK Hour. And the whole team is not here, only Joe Martek. And our loyal producer, who's always here. You know, I shouldn't say always.
Well, yeah, sometimes things come up and
once
I
in a
can't
while,
be here.
Your son lures you out of town.
Yeah,
you have to go to Miami. And,
and
well,
we've been doing that lately.
Yeah, well, hey, listen, that's called life. What are you going to do?
Yep.
As the American health programs, if there's anybody in the world knows it better than you, I don't know who it is.
Yeah, no, ask me, I know.
You know, yeah, right.
I just know that if you have something complex, you need a bigger market.
That's it. And
I'm not saying anything bad about our small little town because I wouldn't trade it for nothing, but if you've got a complex health issue, you need to go someplace world class, and that's Miami.
Well, listen, if you think about it, if you're a world class anything, hey, look in every industry, there's one on top, one on the bottom, and everybody else is somewhere in the middle. Well, how do you know who's on top and who's on the bottom? Well, you got to work on it to find out. It's just the way life works.
Yeah.
340-1590, 340-1590. I am Joe Martek, and back in '04, other teammates that did not show today, Greg.
So you can say I. Back in 2004, I started a little group.
Greg Fasula, attorney, Dan Warren, independent insurance agent, Joe Martek, financial advisor, said, let's start doing radio shows so we can help educate the community in areas of our separate expertise, which we have done. We never dreamed in a million years we'd still be doing them since 14 years later.
But there is overlap with what you do and what they do because the people that come to see you may need the services of Greg Fasula or Dan.
It was interesting. Yesterday, just speaking of yesterday, I met a lady who is originally from Brazil that listened to the radio show. Happened to be not this one. I can't mention WCNO 89.9 FM Christian Radio. It's on 4 o'clock today, but I won't talk about that. Anyway, she listened to the show, and bottom line is she does not have a will and or a trust. Now, one of the problems that happens with, even though she speaks very good English, she was never formally educated in English, so her dominant language is Portuguese.
Okay. And did she live there and then come here? And
she was born and raised, but she came here 20-some years ago.
Okay.
Well, so you've got 20 years of English, but it's like I had a client of mine that was originally from Russia, and he learned what I call factory English because he went to work in a factory, and that's how he learned his English. Then kids go to school, and they come home and teach the parents if they're willing to learn. Now, the parents very often are not willing to learn because the kids get very judgmental and try to teach them sentence structure and prepositions and all the words they could care less about because factory English is like construction English. You know what construction English is?
You know what you need to know to get the job done.
Construction English is this. A sub calls up, and you're the general contractor on the job, and the sub says, cement will be delivered in 5 minutes. Bye.
Okay.
No, hi, Charlie, how are you doing? How are the kids? How are the family?
Okay.
None of that. There is no wasted conversation. No way, because it's called 15 phone calls. You got to coordinate everybody. Everybody's got to make sure they're ready in line because,
Well, no, when that truck's coming, you're pouring concrete.
Yeah, you're pouring concrete. That's it.
You have a
you just
certain
can't
amount
sit
of
for an
time.
hour and wait for people.
No.
So it's
the whole
everybody
ready.
Yeah. So those that work in the construction industry know construction English, and they're not oftentimes charismatic speakers. Well, maybe charismatic is not the right word, but bottom line is flowery speakers, and let's take a sentence and turn it into a book or a paragraph. These guys don't do that. It's called BAM. Anyway, So the three of us started doing the shows, and like you said, there's overlap. I have a lot of experience with wills and trusts because I talk to people about them a lot. I know what people should do and how to do these things, and when very often they need one or not the other. Years and years ago, I had an independent insurance agent, had a farmer's insurance agent originally, then went independent up in Michigan. But that was, prehistoric times. So I have a decent working of the insurance industry. But, hey, everything changes. And if you're not in it every day.
Oh, I'm sure it's tremendously different now than it.
Nothing stays the
now
same.
than it ever was, actually.
Yeah. Then we added Miss Victoria Lloyd, Remax of Stewart, because during the height of the recession, the Great Recession, when real estate became a monster subject because all of a sudden house prices plummeted and there was new words like short sales, and there'd always been deed backs and foreclosures and stuff. But people forget that stuff when things are moving along at a good pace.
Well, everybody knows that foreclosure could happen, but you just thought that, well, the house is the collateral. I can no longer pay. The bank takes the house.
Yeah.
But when that happens on a massive scale and the bank has way too many houses, you've got to come up with another solution.
Yeah, and that's what they did. So the short sale became in because the banks really didn't want to take the house. They wanted to keep the house in good condition. And the people that really did not want to lose their house, they would work with the bank, maintain the house. They would sell the house for a lesser amount of money than that was owed, and the bank agreed to accept that. And in most cases, they forgave the borrower, the people that owned the house originally, the difference in the money.
They still threw them out, though.
Some cases they didn't.
Yeah.
Some cases they actually gave them a 1099 and said, hey, you borrowed $100.
Well, in the beginning, they didn't really know what they were doing because in the beginning, they were throwing people out.
Oh, yeah. Well, on the other hand, during the height of that Great Recession and foreclosures, some people stayed in their houses without making a payment 3 and 4 years. It was a just interesting time, which leads us to Mike Paulus, mortgage broker. And that was an amazing subject to me because the media kept saying, no mortgage money, you can't get a loan. Well, that was never true. There had always been VA loans, no money down, FHA loans, 3.5% down. USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, had a no money down loan. What they did was simply go back to the old rules, which said you've got to prove that you can make the payment. Because during just before the recession, our joke was if you could fog a mirror, you could get a mortgage. And then all of a sudden, when all hell broke loose, it was called, now you got to prove you can make the payment.
Well, they kind of created the problem because they put out mortgages probably shouldn't have been given.
There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Well,
they created their own situation.
See, this goes back to 1976. Then I worked for Chase Manhattan Bank and then became a real estate broker, and we did workouts for banks, meaning the banks ended up taking thousands and thousands of unsold condominium units, subdivisions in the whole state of Florida and other states. And back then, they did the same basic thing, but only on a very large scale.
So they did build it and they will come?
Yeah,
they
built
didn't
400 units and didn't sell any.
But now, does that go hand in hand with the money situation? Isn't that when we had the savings and loan situation and all of that?
Well, what happens is when you have too much money, the things get very loose. Now, how do you mean too much money? Well, the bank is taking in too much money. In fees or whatever. So they say to their officers, hey, we need to loan more money. So we're going to loosen up the restrictions on borrowing money a little bit more. And then during the S&L crisis, they had 110% loans. So I wanted to borrow $1 million, so they gave me $1.1 million. Isn't that exciting? I could foreclose, walk away with $100,000 in my pocket and not a penny out of my pocket. It was just bad news. But I remember sitting with a lender on Clearwater Beach. We had this high-rise condo sitting right on the Gulf of Mexico, pretty building. And I says, boy, it'll never happen again. Guys make this mistake. And he said, don't count on it. All the guys that made these bad loans have either been promoted or fired. And I thought, what a concept. Promoted or fired. Same guy. One gets fired, one gets promoted. That makes really a lot of sense. And literally what happened is it seems like every 10 years, 12 years, there's this roller coaster. Too much, too little.
I remember in my travels down to Miami in like 2007, 2008, 9, in that general area, there were, as the sun was going down or as the sun was coming up, you could look through some of those huge condo buildings and no one's living in any of them. And then look at what happened in Vegas. I mean, in Vegas, they had to tear down buildings that were under construction because the whole thing went bust.
Well, and that's what happens is the Fed tries, our government tries, and boy, do we depend on our government, to not make mistakes or to keep us from making mistakes. Boy, was that a misnomer. But anyway, so it does happen. Well, right now, we're almost in what's called Goldilocks, meaning the economy is humming along extremely well. Interest rates are still very good. Today, our president is saying to the Fed, hey, quit raising interest rates. You're trying to slow down the economy before we need to slow it down. So we'll see what happens. It's a situation that, if you notice, if you drive down a street, there's signs up all over the place, help wanted, help wanted, help wanted.
Well, yeah, Publix is going to be adding 700 new jobs. They're expanding. I just have to say, I have not been stopped by a freight train in years.
Really?
Years.
Why?
In my travel between here and my house.
There's only one train.
Yeah, but I've been stopped like 4 or 5 times recently. And it's all like cargo boxes and trucks. So there's more goods being shipped.
Well, there's another problem we have. I don't know if you pay any attention to this, but there's a shortage of truckers.
Really?
Yeah, they have a shortage of truckers.
Well, that means that we're consuming more stuff.
Well, what happens is, if let's say I need a job, and I put an application in, and 100 people put an application in. Well, the odds are good I'm not going to get hired. But if I put an application in, there's only 3 applications, 1 out of 3 is going to get hired for that job, or maybe all 3. Well, all of a sudden, truckers are saying, hey, I'm making X and I'm gone all the time. Maybe I can do another job and make Y, and I'm not gone all the time. I mean, there's a shortage in the trucking industry, which all of a sudden leads, if you're a company making widgets and you need to ship them from point A to point B, and you can't get enough trucks to do it, rail can put a whole bunch of vehicles and stuff on that train with only 1 or 2 people operating that train. So it's not like a truck can only hold so much. Anyway, hey, build a better mousetrap. If there's a necessity, we will find a way to fill that void. And that's all good news as far as I'm concerned, because when there's not enough, that was Bill Clinton some years ago was on the tube, and they were interviewing him about his foundation, but they snuck in a question that was not part of what he was looking for. And the question was, how do we cure this inequity of people at the bottom making no money and people at the top making all the money? And he said, that'll take care of itself. And people said, what? He said, listen, when unemployment is high, 8 and 10%, you can hire the best people in the world. You don't have to pay them anything because there's 100 out there for every job. All of a sudden, when unemployment is very low and there's 3 and 4%, you got to keep your good people because they'll be headhunted, so you got to give them raises. And sometimes the people at the top are not getting raises so that they can pay the people at the bottom. So if you look at this national movement for $15 an hour minimum wage, almost everybody now that we know of is paying more than, quote, the statistical minimum wage. Well, why? Because they can't get the people to come to work. Well, we'll see.
The only thing is, if you start paying people $15 for jobs that teenagers and retired women used to do,
right.
McDonald's, doesn't that hurt when you bring everybody up to $15,
well, what you do, you're creating
the
inflation.
cream is going to rise to the top, and people are going to be unemployed.
You're still creating. Every time you do this thing, it creates inflation, and
because then you can work anywhere.
Well, it does. Then there's the other side of the coin is too. If a hamburger costs $1 and you raise the cost of labor, it's going to cost $1 nickel or something because there's no such thing as a free.
Or if you make places pay the minimum wage at that rate, they're going to get rid of people.
Well, they're going to get by the best they can. Now, real business. If I make 10 widgets and I need one person to make 10, I hire one person. If I sell 15, that one person might work some overtime. If I sell 20, I might have to hire a new person. I mean, it's all math.
But suddenly, if you need to give that person double the minimum wage, you might go out of business.
You might. Now, on the other hand, the other side of the coin is we have to raise the price of the widget to the consumer.
But then the people who buy your product may not be able to buy your product, and again, you're out of business.
The whole concept, it's a catch-22, but this is called free enterprise. Free enterprise, you can make as much as you can make. Go into the particular occupation you want. If you're not happy with that occupation, change. Go to something else. I mean, I'm a terrible person when it comes to defending people not happy with their jobs, because, and you and I've had this conversation, I think everybody in life's exactly where they want to be. Boy, have I heard arguments on that one. And I said, well, if you're not where you want to be, what are you doing to make a change? Well, I'm doing nothing except complaining about it. So you're not going to school, you're not applying for new jobs, you're not doing anything to change your position except complaining about it. Well, I'm having a hard time with that. One of the things that happened, I think you probably know this, but somehow it was a miracle. My high school sweetheart got pregnant, and here I am with 2 kids at 19. Well, all of a sudden I'm looking at this $1 job, and this is the rest of my life.
Too many mouths to feed, right?
I have no education. I can work 60, 80 hours a week because I'm young, but I'm at the bottom of the spectrum.
You did it all wrong, though.
I did it wrong.
Your high school sweetheart should have stayed home with her mom and dad, and the government should have paid all her bills.
See?
You should have went on to do something else and just been the baby's daddy.
You know what? Guess what? That was hard to do back then, because
it was different back then.
It was. What happened is, first my father would have killed me.
Yes.
But after
then her father would have killed you.
Her father would have killed me. Little minor things, Now, as it showed up, she wanted to kill me later, but after. But the concept was, what am I going to do without a formal education? Well, then you start going to school. You start taking courses. You just keep doing until you get into your comfort level. I've always admired anybody that is content with where they are in life. Content. There's some people you can't stop with a club, and there's some people you can't start with a club. Have you ever heard the saying? This is another one of my more favorite sayings. It's easier to give birth than it is to raise the dead. You ever heard that one?
Okay.
You know what
I've never heard that one before, no.
Well, it's a saying in sales.
But a man could say that easily because they've never done that.
Well, of course we can say it that easily. But it's a sales saying, meaning you hire a salesman and you teach him how to sell and go out and do the product, but he doesn't do it. Well, it's easier to hire somebody else and fire him than it is to try to motivate a person that's not motivatable. Some people, there's no way you're going to motivate them. And that's it. And
money motivates.
Well,
money.
Yeah, and some people you can't stop. There are those, and we've all seen them. That's just called life. Again, I've always admired the person that is, whatever their position is, they're content. I don't care what job it is. My ex-father-in-law, he said his favorite job in the whole world was driving a grader. And I said, man, I'm happy for you because, listen, that's like me riding lawnmower. Got such a rush out of riding my lawnmower because I could see my lawn when I'm done, and it mowed the way I wanted it. And it was a rush for me. Now, when I had an acre and a half.
My dad used to mow the grass on 95. He worked for DOT.
Okay.
Before they contracted it out, and I'd be on 95 and I'd see him on his tractor. He was just
happy,
thrilled with that job.
Well, see. What I didn't do, though, I didn't weed eat and I didn't blow because I didn't like that part. So I hired somebody to come in and weed eat and blow and clean up all that stuff. Because if I
don't do any of that on the highway. They just
if I'd have
drive
done
the
it,
big tractor.
If I'd have done it, it wouldn't have been a good job because I didn't like it. Now, you ever notice if you really enjoy doing something, you're going to do a really good job.
Right.
It's if you don't like doing it, you get by the best you can and hope.
Well, here's the thing. Don't do anything you don't like to do.
Yeah. Don't do anything. Hey. Well, and that's another saying in business. If you don't like doing it, hire somebody to do it. I mean, well, I can't afford it. Well, then you better get out and find another job.
You better start liking it.
340-1590, 340-1590. Now that I'm here by myself, I want to talk about one of my more favorite subjects. In fact, I was talking to a stockbroker buddy of mine yesterday about this subject. We watch these commercials on the radio and radio shows espousing, quote, safe money. Have you ever heard of such a thing? Oh, it's amazing.
No money's safe at my house.
Well, you're right. Well, I want to talk about the word annuity. Now, what is an annuity? An annuity is a contract with an insurance company. It's just that simple. Why do I have such a thing? Well, number one, if I put money into this annuity contract, which is a savings account, let's just call it, and I don't touch it, under normal circumstances, it's tax deferred, meaning I don't pay any taxes till I take money out. When I take money out, it's subject to ordinary income tax, no other form of tax. Next, if I die, forget the word if. When I die, there's no probate. It has named beneficiaries. It doesn't go through the court system unless you don't name a beneficiary.
Now, is that investment over then? They just pay the beneficiary and then that person has to find a way to
Sure.
invest that money?
Yeah.
Or can you continue with that investment?
Well, it depends on the
Okay.
contract. So that's a good question. Different contracts have different strokes for different folks. Sometimes a husband and wife can have it. You can have a spousal continuation.
Okay.
There are different rules. It really depends on the person, what they're looking for, and then you try to put the saddle and the horse together. So the concept is, last but not least, one of the nice things about an annuity contract, if you get sued, it can't be taken away from you. In fact, I had a client this morning was talking about his wife died, and there was credit cards in her name. He said, am I liable for those? I said, the state of Florida says you're only liable for what you signed for. You're not liable for anybody else's debt unless you sign for it. So the answer is,
What if it's a joint account?
if it's a joint account, you're both on it, you're liable.
Okay.
But if you're not, if it's just in one person's name, that person's gone, then that's the one that's liable for it. The spouse is not. Now, there can be technicalities, there's morals, there's all kinds of different things, but just skip and go right straight to the letter. I've had this happen with real estate, where the note is signed by one person or can be signed by both. Mortgage can be in both names, deed can be in both names, but there's a note that says who's responsible for paying the debt, and whoever's on that note is the one responsible. The other people are not. So, whole different ballgame. Anyway, so now the last part of this annuity contract is if you get sued, it can't be taken away from you. It's not subject to attachment by creditors. So now we have basically three different types of annuities. One is called an immediate, which is a pension. So I retire from General Motors or something, and I talk to the HR people, and they said, okay, fine, we're going to give you a check every month for the rest of your life. And the guy says, well, what happens if I die after a month? Money's gone. Well, I don't like that. Okay, fine. We can give you a check every month for the rest of your life, and if you die, it would keep going to your wife. But it'll be a smaller check. Guy says, okay, I like that, but on the other hand, she's older than I am. I'm not too happy about that. We could both die pretty soon. Okay, fine. We can add another wrinkle maybe. Not everybody can do this. We can have a minimum of 10-year payout, so if you both die, it would go to somebody else for at least the 10 years. Sometimes there's a cash payout. Anyway, you keep adding wrinkles into these things, and that's called an immediate, which I call a pension. Is that a good thing? Can be. Can be. What determines how much you get? Well, the amount of money you put in, number one. Number two, how old you are. Number three, what sex you are. And then the last thing is the then current interest rate. So if the interest rate at the time when you do this is high, guess what? It can be a very smart move. But if the interest rates are low, it might not be a smart move. They also have a wrinkle letting it be invested in the market and you get an income from it, which most people don't do at that point. But they usually just take, quote, this fixed pension just like you're retiring from a big company. That's an immediate. Next one is called fixed. Now, fixed sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? I get a fixed interest rate. The fixed interest rate can be adjusted every year, but it can have a bottom, let's say, of 1 or 2. That's it. It's fixed. Some of them are fixed for a whole long period of time. We're going to pay you 3 or 4% every single year for the next 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 or 10 years. That's it.
And then you turn around and see how your money could be making more money somewhere else, and then you're not happy with that.
Now,
Does
that
that
causes
happen?
another... Oh,
Yeah,
big time,
okay.
big time. So people say fixed annuities, what are they paying? Well, let's say they're paying around 3.25% right now. Is that a good deal? Well, it may be a good deal this year. But if next year's interest rates go to 4 or 5, or the year after to 6 or 7, and you're sitting with that 3 or 3.25, you're not going to be happy. Well, what happens if I want to get out of it? Most of them have penalties for a period of time because all of your money goes to work for you the first day. They hold nothing out for commissions, fees, or expenses. So they charge penalties for the first X number of years. Now, every program is different, but let's say 5 or 7 or 10 years. It really depends on the program. Some of the penalties are severe because that brings me into the next fixed annuity. Fixed annuity, and I've seen some of these commercials, I got 10% the first year. Uh-huh. Well, that's called a bonus very often. And is that really absolutely true? Can I take that 10% out and spend it? Highly unlikely.
Okay.
But very often if they say we're going to give you a bonus of 10% or whatever the number is the first year, the penalties might be 12 or 14 or 15 or 20% to get out. Because the company's not going to make any money unless you stick around for a long time. So oftentimes I call these smoke and mirrors, where it makes it look really, really exciting, which leads me into the one that scares me the most. And this is called the index annuity, fixed index. Fixed means we're going to pay you an interest rate. Index means we're going to adjust your interest rate based on the performance of the index. Now, most often we hear the index being the Standard & Poor's 500. Standard & Poor's 500 is 500 of America's biggest companies. And last year, if you'd owned the S&P 500 index through a brokerage firm or whatever firm you want to do it, you were pushing almost 20%, 19 point something percent you make. Well, so then this company comes...
Thank you, President Trump.
Well, let's just say the economy was humming right along, doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And you and I, as far as we're concerned, with all the political persuasion and tax reform, hey, we are humming along as well as we ever have in the history of America, as far as I know, just doing magnificently. So last year it did extremely well. Now, so let's say you're in this fixed index annuity, and your index, the S&P 500, is how you're going to be paid interest. You are not in the market. Now, I've had 99% of the people say, yeah, I am. I'm in the index 500.
So they think they own a piece of that.
Yes.
Okay.
They think the company is invested in that. They're not.
But they're just using those numbers.
They're using those numbers as an index on how you get paid. Well, I had one last week. She came in and says, look, my index says I went up 18 point something percent. But how come I only got 2.5%? I said, well, what they didn't tell you was there's a cap, C-A-P. The cap says you can earn up to that 2.5%. I said, well, how come I was never told that? Well, boy, oh boy, I wonder why you weren't told that. Because this index annuity is a fixed product, and what happens in almost all fixed products, they have a floor, let's say it's 1, and they have a top, which in this case was 2.5. Now, why would they do that? Well, number one...
Yeah, but if they would have said that in the beginning, you might not want it.
Oh, no kidding. Okay. You think there might be some misrepresentation in this world? Errors and omissions, it's called. I don't think I have had but one person ever, in all my years in the business, understand the caps and some of these back-end things.
But why do they tell you, though, that it's based on the S&P?
It is. It's based on the
but
S&P 500.
But then it's only 2.
Well, if the S&P 500 only went up 2, you'd get 2.
Right. Okay.
If it went up 2 1/4, you'd get 2 1/4.
Okay.
If it went up 2 1/2, you got 2 1/2. If it went up 2 7/8, you got 2 1/2, because the cap was that.
2.5.
But the scenario of this fixed index is you're always going to earn something, or you can never go down, quote, because if the market collapses, you just don't make any money that year.
Okay.
Or you make 1%, whatever the floor is, whatever it might be. The scenario that most people are sold these things, and by the way, these are insurance products.
And how do they make money off that?
Well,
at such a small percentage.
Well, let me put it this way. The insurance companies work on a very small margin, but their money has to be in these fixed products. Most of it has to be invested in the bond market. And bonds are paying around 3%. So if they are invested in the bond market and they're paying 2.5 max, it gives them a 0.5 point spread.
Okay.
So that means that's why they have these penalties that go out 5, 6, 7, and 8 and 10 years, because in order for them to make any money, you've got to stick around for a long time.
And they put a lot of people into things that they don't want, and people will want out.
And then the people want out, and they pay the penalty.
Yeah.
And in fact, I had my compliance people called me this week and said, Joe, you got this client of yours that has 2 index annuities and wants to get out. And I had them sign where they know how much the penalty is, they know everything, but they were lied to. They lied to, and then
so now they're cutting their losses.
Well, now they're cutting their losses, saying, "Hey, there's no way in the world I'm ever going to make more than 2.5% because that's the cap in these contracts." Well, isn't that exciting? So now,
and for what length of time is this money tied up?
well, it depends. Every contract is different, but it could be 7 years, 8 years, 10 years. They have penalty phases that start off at X and they go down every year until at the end of Y. At the end of the period, there's
and then
none.
after that, you can take your money, no penalty at all?
Yes.
Okay.
However, maybe.
Oh, okay.
Maybe some of these contracts, because they're going to pay you this big bonus up front and they're going to guarantee all of these different things and these payouts, the only way you can collect all of the stuff that the smoke and the mirrors is to do what's called annuitize, which means set up a pension. Then they're going to, let's say you put in this $100,000 and now it's supposedly worth $200, but if you try to cash it in, you may only get $100. But if you take a pension, they're going to base it on the $200 and they're going to plug in certain numbers. And you're going
But they're taking a gamble that you're not going to collect it all, and at some point they're going to keep your money.
Well, not necessarily. If everybody did according to the rules, the insurance company makes and the client makes exactly what the contract says. It's not that it's, let's put it to you this way. If you sat down with a person and they understood every bit of this program, I think 90% of the people that get them wouldn't get them. They don't understand. It's a very complex product. A lot of our broker-dealers out there. Now, broker-dealer means like the Dean Witters, Merrill Lynch's, Smith Barney's, I'm Centaurus Financial. If they don't want us doing these things under normal circumstances. If we do them, it has to be an approved product that they approve. If you buy one that is an approved product on my list, you have to sign a piece of paper saying you're dumb as a stump, you don't know what you're doing, but you don't care.
You want to do it anyway.
You want to do it anyway. And I'm kidding. That isn't what you say. But in effect, you've got to make some statement that you understand the pitfalls and that this works for you. Now, back to the rear end and the saddle. There's one that fits every saddle, and there is a product out there that might work just fine for some people. It's like tax-free bonds. Tax-free bonds might pay 2 or 3% tax-free. Well, that's pretty low. But if you've got $10 million in the bank, get 2-3% tax-free, $200,000-300,000 a year. That makes you feel pretty good.
That works out good that way.
Well, but that's the main customer for these tax-free bonds. So the index annuity. The only thing I can say to people is, and I can't tell you how often I've sat with people and they bring it out and they say, Joe, explain this thing to me. And I look at it real quick and I say, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to call the company up, not the agent. We're going to call the company and we're going to ask questions and I'm going to write down the questions and we're going to get on the phone, speakerphone, and you're going to give them permission to talk to me. And I'm going to ask the questions, and you're going to hear the answers. And then when we're all done, you're going to throw up. Well, because they didn't understand what they had. And I've had people just livid. Oh, I'm going to sue. I'm going to do this. But, hey, in these contracts, you got 30 days to get out or 10 days, whatever it might be. If you don't get out in that time, hallelujah, good luck. Because you're supposed to read all this stuff and understand it. And you sign papers that said you understood what you're doing. Well, hey, let me tell you, it's like reading a mortgage or house application.
Sure.
Who in the world understands everything? Read your homeowner's insurance policy. Read your car insurance.
Oh, please, read your homeowner's insurance policy.
Oh, boy, try
Read it, though. Try. You have to try. Because a lot of people will find out that even their wind coverage is no coverage.
Well, the key thing
later
that
on.
you need to have, let me go back here. To find somebody with integrity is number one. How do you find somebody with integrity? Well, usually if they've been in business for 10 or 20 years, the odds are pretty good that they're straight people, especially in our market here where people come and go so much. The average person, I don't care what you do, these are very difficult things to read. Very difficult. So the key thing is...
And it's designed that way on purpose?
Well, it's written by attorneys for attorneys because they're written basically to protect one side or the other. Because when lawsuits come, the words that are in that contract are the basis for a lawsuit. So
the surprising thing that was in my policy was the hurricane coverage that doesn't cover wind-driven rain.
Yeah.
What is a hurricane?
Well,
it's pretty much wind-driven rain.
The key thing is that's water damage, but there's different types of water damage.
Yeah.
Flood means water coming up from below.
Right. That's flood.
Rising water.
Wind-driven
Wind-driven rain. When I take every building that was built on the ocean, all these cement block buildings. When that wind blows like crazy, all of a sudden that water's coming through the cement and the cement block because it's porous.
It comes through everything. It can come anywhere.
It doesn't come through wood very well.
But, it blows up under your soffit,
Yep.
and then it can run between your block and your drywall.
Yeah, I mean, the key thing is...
So the inside of the house got wet, but yet there's no roof damage.
You have to understand what your contract says and ask the question.
Exactly. Yeah. So I would say to people, homeowners insurance, and especially now with the storm,
big time.
In the Gulf, know what you got.
Look at those poor people.
Call
up there.
Dan.
This is what a day they're going to have. And I think what I was talking in Panama City, the mayor was saying half the people have not left. Well, and they're going to have a 10, 12-foot storm surge probably.
Yeah, but we have to be, I think that they're very irresponsible, these news people and these weather people, because you have to go, it's not 12 feet. It's above the dune.
Yeah.
It's got to get to the dune line first.
Yeah.
And then what you're really getting is
could be
a couple,
3 feet, 2 feet, 5 feet.
Yes.
Don't know.
And it rolls in and it rolls down the street.
Yep.
It doesn't come in like a tidal wave. And people think that it comes in like a 15-foot tidal wave.
It just keeps coming up and up.
So,
and up.
yeah.
Well, look, but I know that when Katrina hit New Orleans, greater New Orleans.
Yeah, but they're below sea level to begin with.
Well, Panama City to start with, though, that's pretty low up there.
Yeah, yeah.
This
Well, the Gulf side is different than
with.
than the East Coast.
It's a very, 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 very big storm. Anyway, so much for that. So now I'm back into the index. All I'm saying to folks, just be careful. Just be careful when you look at these quotes. As soon as it says index, the magic word is, write down, what is the cap, C-A-P. Can the cap be changed? Now, this is what really upsets me. Oh, yeah, the company can change the cap.
Oh, without you
have nothing to do with
to
it.
that? Or
No,
okay.
They can change it. Well, that's exciting. Can they change it up? Sure. Can they change it down? Sure. Which way do you think it's going to go?
Down.
Now, let's say it goes up. Hallelujah. But the key is this. What a red flag that is to say the cap can be changed. So if I agree with the cap going in, but then there's a clause in there that says it can be changed, that causes me a little bit of consternation.
If your bottom is at 1% and your upper cap is 2.5%,
right?
It comes back down to closer to the bottom?
I don't know. It doesn't go back up.
Yeah.
Normally, I've not seen caps go up.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean they won't. It doesn't mean they won't, because the contract allows it to go both ways. See, a regular fixed annuity, if it's fixed for 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 years, it pays an interest rate. But some of the fixed annuities, not the index, they can go up because the underlying investments are in bonds, and if the bond market, the interest rates go up, they have new bonds that come in, they can raise the interest rate. Doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. Like right now, if we look at literally what's happening today in our economy, if we remember a few years ago, like a couple years ago, interest rates were 0. Now we're around 2%, and it's probably going to get around 3, 4%, maybe 5 or even higher as the economy keeps improving or staying very good, because the Fed tries to control inflation, and the way they do it is by controlling interest rates. So what they do makes people happy that have CDs in a bank, but it makes people trying to buy a house real unhappy, because if all of a sudden interest rates are 10, 15% again, that just shuts the housing market right down, which causes a recession, and here we go again, you know. Anyway, last but not least is what's called a variable annuity. Variable annuity says, okay, I'm in the market. I can be invested in all of these different funds that look just like mutual funds. They're managed by the same companies, and they call them mutual funds or exchange-traded funds. But because they're in an annuity contract, they use a different word, that's all. But the bottom line is they're funds. Some of them can be the S&P 500. They can be the NASDAQ 100. They can be whatever fund. There's hundreds of them available, hundreds of them, different funds. Now, the S&P 500, literally last year, if you were invested in just that one fund, you were up pushing 20%, 19% for the year. Okay, so you could be in this, quote, variable annuity contract with that underlying investment, meaning the S&P 500, and you'd have been up 17, 18, 19%, whatever it was for the last year, and that's your money, period. That's your money. So it's called, then why am I in the insurance contract? Well, the annuity contract with the insurance company says, okay, fine, you're in the market over here. When market goes up, we're happy. But what the insurance company oftentimes says, here's what we'll do. We'll make a couple of wrinkles in that for you. One, we'll have a guaranteed death benefit. We, the insurance company. Now, you're supposed to know the claims paying ability of the insurance company, my compliance people say. You have to know what the insurance company is going to say, because they're there to protect your heirs in case you die on a wrong day by protecting your money, or maybe even paying you an extra 5% a year, or paying you on a highest anniversary. They got all kinds of different wrinkles. So let's say we put $100,000 in, and you die and the market's down to 150 all of a sudden, but the contract had a 5% gain per year, and you didn't take any money out. Your family might get 115, 120, whatever it might be, rather than the market value. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if the market value was higher than the guarantee, that's what your family would get. In the meantime, we got a faithful listener who's, you're not quite in that hurricanes area, Bulldog, but you're moving closer to it all the time. If Mary Beth gets a job in Panama City, what are you going to do?
No, she's not going to do that, man. But no, we're getting some rain bands off of it. It's good for plants. We just did some landscaping, so I'm not.
You don't have much.
No, that's good. Cloud cover and water, very good.
How much wind?
Yeah,
how much wind?
absolutely.
How much wind do you have?
We've got like 20 miles an hour, maybe.
Insignificant, yeah.
On a gust,
Yeah, we got about the same thing here.
Well, after last year, I mean, we got pretty damn close to the eye, and I'm sorry, but that was a little rough. Hey, I plug in for you, Joe. I don't know which annuity you've got, Mary Beth, but man, we're looking at the returns on it on a regular basis. It's doing really, really well. So I'm going to give you a compliment there, sir.
I'm listening. Are you done yet? Come on. I'm soliciting for a longer compliment. Well, here's what happens in Bulldog. This is you are stereotypical, my normal prospect and client. Now, because you asked a lot of questions when we got started, you were there to protect Mary Beth's money. You wanted to make sure she was doing the right thing. We went through it, upside one side, down the other. But 6 months or a year later, I do this every day. The average person forgets at least half of what they heard, maybe more. So now they're saying, hey, Joe, thank you for doing a good job. What do I have?
Well, we know what we have, and we know what the return rate is, and I know what the rate of interest is, and I go over the financials quite well, thank you.
But here comes what happens with this particular contract. So we're in the market, and the market's making 15, 20% a year. We're happy. But in Mary Beth's contract, she also has two things that protect other people, meaning you and her kids. In case she dies on the wrong day and the market all of a sudden collapses, her money's protected. Plus, I think in hers, it's got a 5% per year growth no matter what, or could be the highest anniversary, or the market value, whichever number's the best. So
right, it's a locked-in rate, and we go from there.
There you go. So that protects you and the kids in case she dies on the wrong day. I always joke about that, but it's the truth. I mean, your kids want you to die when the market's up. They don't want you to die when the market's down. But the insurance company's there to protect the family of the person that owns the annuity. Then they have another thing that's there to protect Mary Beth in case she doesn't die, and that is they're going to guarantee her, the insurance company, a 5% income for the rest of her life on whatever she put in, and once a year they're going to step it up if the market goes up on her particular contract. So let's say she put in $100,000 and she makes 20% one year. Now the new lock-in is $120,000, and that if she started taking an income at 5%, that would be $6,000 a year for the rest of her life. However, if it goes up again during the year, that next anniversary, her raise, she could get a raise. And each time she gets a raise, according to the contract, it can't go down. So
right, so it goes up to like maybe say 8,000, then 10,000, or whatever
the number is. It can,
and it's it's a perfect contract. And so again, you wanted your accolades. I'm giving them to you again, Jeff.
Very good. Well, listen, where do I send it? Hey, are you still serving McAllen when you come down?
No, you're buying after all this. I mean, I can't plug you anymore, Joe. You've got to do the McAllen for me. How about that?
Listen, I think quit calling up and plugging me. Just bring the McAllen.
You got it, son. I'll be there the 23rd.
See you then, my man.
All right.
Bye.
Later.
340-1590, 340-1590. And this was a very stereotypical case. Mary Beth was working for a hospital. She's a nurse. She had a 401k, 403b. They have different numbers if it's a profit or a nonprofit, but it's the same thing. Money is put into the account. Very often it's matched, or a portion is put in by the employer, and you put in a portion. And then when you leave the employer, you can roll this away from the employer and put it into your own account, which is now called an individual retirement account. Why would you do that? Well, one, you have some more investment options that you may not have had with the employer. Two, this annuity contract, which is a variable annuity, says, yeah, you can be in the market like you were with the 401k, but we're going to put some insurance there to protect your family in case you die on the wrong day, or protect you in case you don't die, that no matter what, we know you've got guaranteed income for life. So the insurance company is the important part there. And again, compliance people say you're supposed to know the insurance company's claims paying ability. Now, I love that contract, good, bad, or indifferent times. Here was another one. It was an interesting question. So the market is going up, everything is doing fine. Is the market always going to go up? No.
No.
Have you ever heard interest rates go up, bonds go down? You ever heard that?
Yes.
Do you remember that? Do you remember why?
No.
Okay, here we go. You and I buy one bond for $1,000.
Okay.
$500 a piece. We're partners, and it pays 5%.
Okay.
Now, these are called corporate bonds. This is not savings bonds from the government, from the bank. These are corporate bonds. And what they do, they all have a start date and an end date. Could be 10 years, 20 years. And they're going to pay me interest, pay us our interest every year. They might pay quarterly or whatever their deal is, but we're going to collect our 5%. So a year goes by, and you say, Joe, I don't like you anymore. I don't want you as a partner anymore. You're just like my ex-husband. Forget that guy. Anyway, go get me another partner. So Alan Love's not here, and he's not the brightest bulb on the tree. He's just a retired attorney. You know how they are. So I said, Alan, bail me out. Veronica doesn't want me as a partner anymore. $500 bonds paying 5%. Give me the $500 and you can be her partner. And Alan says, well, Joe, new bonds are paying 6%. Interest rates have gone up. Why would I want your 5%? And the maturity date is 10 years out. You're going to have to discount 1% a year for the next 10 years. So take 1% a year for the next 10 years off of that 500. I'll give you 400 and something. So I can have a yield of 6%.
Right.
Interest rates go up, bonds go down. Okay, so now let's take this, quote, insurance contract. Inside of the insurance contract, it's got, let's say, 50 or 80 or 100 different options you can invest in, including bonds. Personally, bonds today I think are a mistake because interest rates are going up, which means the value of bonds is not good. But let's say interest rates get up to 7 or 8%. And the market starts to crash and goes backwards. Well, you can switch out of a stock fund like the S&P 500 or whatever the fund is, and you can move into a bond fund, because if interest rates start going down and you got a 7% bond, all of a sudden everybody wants yours because interest rates are going down.
Okay.
So you not only get your interest rate, but you have a value go up in case you want to sell it. So there is a time for bonds. I just don't think today is the time. But listen, historically, it will happen again. We don't know when. 340-1590.
That's the problem with everything. You just don't know when.
You don't know when. Well, I don't know who it was. I had another client of mine that called me this morning on the way here. He said, Joe, marijuana stocks. And he said, what do you think? And I said, it's a big subject today.
But what's really going on with that? I mean...
Well, here's the problem. You've got medical marijuana is legal.
Okay.
So every company that has traded stock. It's medical marijuana. It's not recreational because that's against the law. And you can't put the money in a bank, can't have a stock.
Right.
Because it's against the law.
Right.
it may be legal in one state, but banks don't care about. A national bank says, hey, we don't care.
Yeah, well, there's that little FDIC situation.
Little FDIC all of a sudden puts a crimp in it.
Because that makes it federal.
Well, anyway, so I said, here's the problem with marijuana. Everybody can grow it in their backyard. Anybody. I mean, it's a weed. You can't hardly stop it.
That's why you call it weed.
It's why they call it weed. So there's no proprietary knowledge. If somebody could find a way to make marijuana proprietary, where they had something,
patent or
and only one people had it, all of a sudden there might be a potential.
Well, that's like vitamins and herbs.
Yeah,
they can't be.
Yeah, they can't patent
them. Okay.
So that's why drugs make big money, because they can patent.
Well, they're chemicals. They're not herbs.
Well, sometimes they come from derivatives. Like aspirin comes from salicylic acid, which comes from white willow tree bark. Okay, but it's now.
Yes, but it's processed into something.
Processed. Yeah. So the key,
which is proprietary.
Proprietary. So, but the key thing is this: in order to make it proprietary, you get a patent on it. And all of a sudden, now you have a chance to really make it take off. So I was telling to him, I said, "Man, I'm having a hard time with these marijuana stocks because 10 new companies start every week, because we can all grow it in our backyard or a greenhouse or whatever. And to make medical, all we have to do is to have a strain that is approved by the whatever in order to make it medical. Then it's dispensed by a medical pharmacy. I mean, it's the same thing as a drug, but still 10 companies. There's no proprietary. So it's hey. Is it going to work? Probably. Are people going to make a lot of money on it? Probably. Are people going to make a lot of money in the stock? I'm having a hard time figuring out how, because there will be 1,000 companies. Then what will happen is eventually, if it gets legalized nationwide for everything, some of the big boys, Coca-Cola, Pepsi.
Yeah, shouldn't it be like ginseng or something else? That's an herb.
It's the same thing.
You would think that it would go the same way.
It will. But on the other hand, if a big companies get into the business.
But you can't get buzzed on ginseng.
You never know. 340-1590, 340-1590. I've been told I'm winding down.
You got about a minute.
I got about a minute. So the key thing, I got about a minute. You don't realize.
TEAMLESS MARTEK.
This is the last minute of your life, what you might accomplish in that 1 minute. First, you'd be in a dead panic. That's for sure. Yes?
I'm constantly amazed, though.
At what?
Let's say that again.
Your last minute?
Yeah.
Well, you look like you passed your last minute a long time ago.
Then why didn't I lay down somewhere?
Well, you probably did, but somebody picked you up and said it was dinner time.
No.
All right, folks, and until next week, and hopefully, well, Alan Love, he was sick this morning. That's why he didn't show.
Well, we hope he's feeling better.
Yeah, and then Dan didn't call me. Nobody else called me to say they cared, so we don't know.
No, and Victoria didn't call.
Nobody loved me. I'm telling you, just you and me, girl.
Yeah, nothing.
This affair is really getting pretty old, Hey, until next week.
Just stop meeting like this.
Yeah, you're right. No, really.
Goodbye, Joe.
Am I done?
Yes.
Goodbye, Joe.
You've been listening to the TEAM MARTEK Hour. The TEAM MARTEK Hour is a paid program. The content was provided by the advertiser. WPSL, its staff, management, and ownership were not responsible for its content. Investment involves risk. Prior to making any investment, an investor should meet suitability requirements. Past results are not necessarily indicative of future performance. Neither the opinions expressed nor the information provided constitutes a recommendation to purchase or provide investment advice. The material presented is not a substitute for obtaining professional advice from a qualified person or firm. Securities offered through Centaurus Financial, member FINRA and SIPC. Tune in again next Wednesday at 11:05 for the TEAM MARTEK Hour here on WPSL 15.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.